I firmly believe that 2026 is going to be LA Knight's year, with them qualifying in the Elimination Chamber alongside Cody, Randy Orton, and Javon Evans. Is kind of illuminating to me that while it is a star kind of studded Elimination Chamber, it does seem like there's going to be a lot of things at play. I think that kind of result in that multi-man WWE title match at WrestleMania that I do think is going to go down. I do think it would be kind of uneventful to have Drew and Cody just simply, in another one-on-one match at WrestleMania, unfortunately. So I do think that, besides Jacob Fatu getting involved, I do think LA Knight is going to be involved as well. His trajectory, I feel like, for LA Knight, if we kind of pay attention to how other superstars of similar stature have been treated in years before their ascension, kind of similar. I'd say in this case, I'm talking about Drew and CM Punk specifically. They were in, multiple top level feuds, and while there wasn't necessarily actual success in terms of like W's, wins, or title reigns or anything like that, the following year a lot of those things came to fruition as like a snowball due to the storytelling and the stories and involvement they had in the year prior. That's kind of happening essentially with LA Knight. We have this kind of tension boiling over with the Vision and LA Knight, as LA Knight's kind of been that main thorn in their side besides their own kind of hubris in the masked people and whatever's kind of going on with that. LA Knight has been the kind of the main thorn in the side of the Vision, and I don't think that's going to be unnoticed, and I don't think that's something that's not done on purpose. I think that's totally purposeful, in the idea that LA Knight is probably going to be key to that world title and or WWE title kind of match that happens, whatever the Vision decides to get involved with. I do think that LA Knight will be the foil to that essentially, but I don't think that should just be literally him being the foil, but that meaning that he would then ascend and take the title. I mean, if we look at essentially the fan reaction for LA Knight, right, ever since he essentially made that character switch, within a couple of segments he had all the fans on board because his charisma, his how quick he is on his feet, and what he brings to the mic is sorely needed and desperately needed in this era of flips over substance and style over slick wordplay. And he is someone that is such a throwback. That's why people, I think, love to call him Stone Cold or The Rock, just because he's a throwback wrestling character that is genuinely larger than life. So when you see that, who are you going to compare them to? Other characters that felt larger than life. Beyond that, right, in the idea of his gimmick and everything, just once he kind of was in that LA Knight driver's seat, we saw the 2 US title wins, which he got a huge pop and ovation for, and people were still riding that wave with him. Even before that, you had that initial title shot that he had against Roman Reigns, right, at Crown Jewel during Roman Reigns' peak run, where people were vying to see LA Knight, this new guy off the block, off his first real feud, win the title. People were suspending their disbelief in the idea of Roman Reigns being untouchable because of how good LA Knight was and how exciting he was and what he brought to the table. People wanted to see a possible change because that's what your face is supposed to do there. Even in that, we can talk about before that with kind of the whole Wyatt situation and how he still gracefully handled that, despite, I think, it being lackadaisical booking with the Mountain Dew match and stuff like that. LA Knight kind of really did make those segments in legitimizing Bray Wyatt's creepiness and fear factor by letting it kind of disturb him, but not deter him from delivering promos with passion, and it kind of legitimized Bray in that moment too. Unfortunately, we obviously didn't get to see what became of that, but for LA Knight to be that skillful, I think, to make stuff like the Mountain Dew match and stuff like that work in hindsight, I think is a testament not only to his commitment to make everything the best it could be, but how great he is as a pro wrestler, and that kind of points me to everything that's kind of happening now with LA Knight and the Vision, and kind of what the trajectory looks like for LA Knight going into the rest of 2026. I do think that 2026 owes LA Knight a world title win, and not just a shot. I think a legit program and chase that results in people paying tickets to possibly see LA Knight take the title. I think we've been teased with it multiple times before. and his contemporaries in terms of age and stature. Damian Priest and Gunther are now, world champions, multiple-time world champions in some cases, right? And are legitimizing themselves in the iconography of the WWE. And I do believe that LA Knight does deserve kind of a place there. He is money, right? And they know that in terms of, he's one of the top merch sellers. He's used in the Slim Jim ads with Bianca Belair. Essentially, they're one of their top female superstars because it's the energy and chaoticness that LA Knight brings to his promos, and the passion that he brings obviously is extremely gravitating. And his involvement with the Vision throughout most of 2025 into 2026, I think, is a small tease to the idea that LA Knight is essentially the foil to the Vision, that Braun and them won't become world champion because LA Knight will. And I think that is a more exciting and compelling story to possibly tell on Raw, if they wanted to go ahead with that, post Mania maybe, especially with the kind of the landscape right now being CM Punk, the older guard essentially as the champion on Raw. That can be a story for LA Knight to climb. Essentially, this is the old guard here who told you and who kept you out for so long, and you are their contemporary. You can hang with CM Punk. You should be a top guy. There's been a story about this essentially with LA Knight ever since on essentially Cody Rhodes' podcast, where he kind of went on there and there was a whole diatribe between him and Cody about, LA being a top guy, whether or not he is. And Cody convinced, because, Cody knows, because he has an eye for the business, because if you're at the top, you have to have an eye for business to keep yourself at the top, right? He knows LA Knight is money. He knows LA Knight is a top guy. But I do think in terms of the management, I do think they see his age, I really do think they see his age as a negative on him, when in reality it should be the what separates him from everybody, that he is a sly veteran, which is why I do think he should kind of have specifically a feud with CM Punk and not a young Vision member who has the title, just because I think that there's a lot more to chew on in the context between LA Knight and a CM Punk in terms of the career trajectory, where they both were at different points in their lives, but they're both at similar ages. And I think that's a legitimate story there, especially when the crowd is so inundated with LA Knight too, that he might as well be a staple of WWE. The dude is owed a world title. I think especially the two US title reigns that he did have were kind of mediocre. Him winning it off of Logan Paul, I think, was a cool moment at SummerSlam. But beyond that, just, at least he can say he was a champion in WWE, but I don't think that that's really the story to tell there. I think that there's a whole story that can be built around him winning the title, him overthrowing the Vision that was a thorn in his side that kept screwing him over, the Rollins screwing him over with the injury angle, the various times that he was taken out of commission due to Braun and Bronson and all these things, and he's always been one to stick up for the faces, you know what I mean? So I think there has to be a comeuppance for the Vision and a reward for LA Knight for being so consistent. And maybe WWE does know this and they're completely cognizant of it, and because of that we are getting, like, for example, the Unchosen t-shirt after the chewing out by Triple H that happened to LA Knight on the Unreal show. Maybe they do understand that we do and are invested in this man's success, so they are kind of playing that into a quasi-meta storyline, essentially, where, kind of similar to Daniel Bryan, right? The company might not see LA Knight as a success, but us, the fans, with our rabid merch support and how loud we are for him, obviously want to hijack and kind of take over the show to let them know LA Knight is it. And LA Knight can kind of, I guess, approach that from a anti-authority angle, which I think LA Knight would, obviously with his character, easily lean into, and you can kind of have another Daniel Bryan, Stone Cold, etc., blah blah blah, kind of anti-authority figure, super face that rebels against the Triple H, the boss, the TKO of WWE, and people would really be on board for that, since people are already on board for LA Knight as an entity to be a world champion, with regardless of his story or not. And that, I think, that is extremely rare. Most people in the WWE, and if not all of them, get inundated with a couple of stories that really cement themselves with the audience. It's very seldomly, like maybe in the cases of like your Shinsuke's days and stuff like that? Do you have someone who just oozes charisma immediately and people are just, at the sight of ready to hop on board? And LA Knight was one of those people that at the sight of, he had everything down as the Eli Drake character, that all you really need to do was, obviously switch the name up for gimmick infringement so you can get your royalties or whatever, and let him be on TV. And that's the reality of it, is that the whole time LA Knight knew he needed to just be LA Knight. And I would love if that story and everything would come to fruition with everything that's happened, if he were able to finally win a world title. And I think that would be an excellent story that they can, in hindsight, really call back on and say that they planted the seed if they really want to go for it, so we'll kind of see what they want to do kind of moving forward. I guess we're going to see how Elimination Chamber kind of stacks up. It does seem like there's going to be shenanigans and stuff moving forward for the Elimination Chamber and whatever happens for the WWE title and stuff like that, but I kind of just do see LA Knight at some point vying for one of these titles, and I do think that his story going to 2026 might be a main character story and something that gets focused on more due to just how he had such a presence in 2025 despite not being the main player. So let me know what you guys think. Maybe is LA Knight really destined for stardom, or am I just thinking too much in the clouds? Am I too much of an LA Knight mark that I just want to see it happen? Let me know in the comments, guys. Take care.